Well, I for one am very glad that Veilguard does exist, if for no other reason than without it we would not have this book. A book that is frustratingly close to being one of the greatest art books ever. In the areas most important to its success, it is spectacular, and yet it drops the ball on some things that, while petty in comparison and shouldn't affect your decision to get the book, nonetheless are so unimpressive that they undermine the high regard if we're to appraise this as a masterwork. There were no art books for Origins or DA2, though art for those was featured in the World of Thedas lore books that I previously reviewed, as well as the BioWare retrospective book. The Art of Dragon Age Inquisition was a good book, but the things I liked best about it were only minor features. While what I love about the Art of Veilguard is they've taken those features and ramped it up to 11 and made them the focus. Specifically, the biggest, best, and most defining feature in this book are what I call narrative and slice-of-life illustrations. Because of the way video game art is created and being created for a function, it can be too utilitarian and isolated for immersion and wonder for an audience who are here to enjoy them as art and entertainment. Meaning a lot of the typical art book experience is a gallery of isolated characters posing, isolated weapons, beautiful environment pieces, but completely devoid of life. The highlights for me are always the true concept art and narrative art pieces that are about conveying the vibe and story, and so combine all those elements to create something more mentally and visually engaging and exciting. Again, in your typical art book, those are precious crumbs. In the Art of Veilguard, it's an absolute feast, to a degree that is incomparable to any other film or game art book I can recall. Artworks depicting actual scenes, characters, in an environment doing stuff. Art that fires the eyes and imagination for engagement beyond, oh, that's a pretty design. Dragon Age's hallmark, traditionally, has been its storytelling, so it makes a lot of sense this would be the case. In fact, there's a part in here where they mention the artists and writers working in the same room. Like I said, Inquisition also contained pieces like this, and they were my favorite part of that book, but they were still a relatively minor feature compared to more traditional design works. Whereas here, these works are not just a highlight of the book, they define this book. They're on display throughout, and the main thing responsible for eliciting such an enthusiastic experience for me. Going through, I would frequently forget that I was looking at an art book for a game. It often feels like a completely different experience, and that's a good thing. A lot of it feels like storybook illustration, or the kind of art you'd find in TTRPG books where the goal is to excite the players and help them visualize this world and the adventures within. And even, unexpectedly, my favorite sensation was when it often felt like concept art and stills for an animated movie, except way better than most actual animation art books. The main thing responsible for that is the art style. The game's art director is Matt Rhodes, who I've been a fan of for a billion years because his art has always been defined by a sort of animation style combined with narrative-focused content, and his art and influence permeate this book. This praise and enthusiasm for the narrative artworks and style are admittedly a little more subjective and project-dependent, but the curation also excels at something that more categorically defines a great art book, specifically the amount of stuff that is completely different to the final product. Again, most art books, the experience is a pointless, uninteresting parade of final designs you've already seen on screen. Meanwhile, early, alternate, exploratory, and unused designs and ideas is like finding water in the desert, whereas this book's more like a water park. Of course, there are also plenty of final designs, posing, etc., but as with the narrative art, the point is that here the ratio is completely flipped compared to what we see in every other book. Exploratory, evolution, and unused ideas are such a huge focus that the book is a fundamentally rich, interesting, and unique experience. It's telling that the Art of Veilguard proper doesn't even start until 100 pages in. Before that, it's almost like an art book and explorations of a completely different Dragon Age games. That's the result of such a protracted and mutating development cycle, but such a great inclusion. We've seen tons of similar books that ignore earlier iterations of a project, perhaps because it's too different, not closely relevant enough to the final product. Even if that's true, it's stupid because then all that amazing work is hidden away somewhere never to be seen again, where an art book is the perfect excuse to make use of it. I'll put an excerpt from Matt Rhodes' forward here, and you can pause if you want to read it. The last few sentences he describes the idea of this book well. So the impeccable, peerless curation is this book's forte. Design and layout are a more frustratingly mixed bag, and I say frustrating because the layout flip-flops between displays of consummate genius and drooling idiocy. Thankfully, the former dominates and the latter only results in minor issues, but not only are they pervasive, but there's just this annoying sensation at the incredulity of how a book can display such good judgment and poor judgment all on one page. the good parts. So quality curation only amounts to anything if it's matched with a satisfying quantity, another huge problem most books have. Whereas this book absolutely delivers. They pack an appropriate and satisfying amount in here. It offers a lot, and that isn't just determined by the number of images alone, it's the number of images times the value of the images, quality times quantity. That combination is the key to this book's rousing success where most others fail. It was also particularly refreshing to see a book using this oversized format appropriately for the most part. Another impressively wise choice to maximize the space is the book's disdain for margins. Most images run right up to the page edges, and the gaps between images are only about a pixel wide. It's awesome. The character and object pages are its strongest in terms of quantity and layout. They're excellent, though still not perfect since some images are too small, but it's still far better than the too few, large and/or boring approach we usually see in books. But when it comes to the narrative and especially location artworks, the designer apparently starts drinking and chipping away at that good impression. So the biggest thing that pisses me off, as ever, is the abundance of images pointlessly spoiled crossing the gutter. Doubly so when it's one image taking up 2 pages. But I mean, the day I see an art book designed by someone with the half-brain required to know that's unfathomably stupid, I'll probably be so shocked my soul will leave my body. Likewise, there's the other usual sizing and balance struggles. I said before how the character art sometimes runs too small, meanwhile there's also plenty of art that's too large. Overall though, it's still better than most. However, there are also some uniquely bizarre issues. You'll have seen the book goes for a semi-scrapbook style, which is my personal favorite style for book design, and it often works well in this book's favor. However, in the finer execution, it shifts from chaotic good to chaotic evil, often being preposterously random and inelegant. I know a lot of people hate when art overlaps other art. I usually don't mind when it's just overlapping a visually unimportant or void part of an image, and mostly that's the case here, and it's used well. However, there are also times when the image beneath is too obscured, or it's just been done so unnecessarily and/or strangely. More than that, though, is just how baffling a lot of the layout choices are. Like, rather than just taking the straightforward, intuitive approach, it seems like they go out of their way to do something unintuitive and stupid. The location pages particularly are almost awful. But overall, again, the impact of all this is minor compared to its success. Like I said, it still delivers. It's just incredulous that such thoughtful, skilled handling should be spoiled by crazy blemishes of such thoughtless, random-seeming nonsense. But by far the most utterly heinous and inexplicably mental example of this is the placement of the text. It's a problem so deeply idiotic that this is actually the first time I've seen it done. So, first of all, text will occasionally be printed on its side, vertically. I can kind of appreciate this in some cases where it's clearly done to maximize space for the images, but that only represents the minority of instances. Mostly it's just been done for absolutely no reason. Again, seeming to go to extra effort to go out of the way to do something stupid and unnecessary, but it gets worse. The captions are usually printed on the artworks. Again, something I think is fine if it's discreet. Here it frequently is not, to the degree that sometimes the captions are printed right in the center of an artwork. I truly cannot conceive how this would even occur to someone as a good idea, yet alone make it past the whole publishing team. How could they have the audacity to so grossly and obnoxiously spoil someone else's work and their audience's enjoyment of it? And then to add insult to injury, the text they're defacing it with doesn't even have the decency to have any value half the time. Most of the text is short, simple captions telling you what it's an image of. That's fine. Sometimes it'll be a little longer sentence offering behind-the-scenes context, insight, or trivia. Very short and basic, but great when it appears. But there are also a ton of comments that are so shallow and pointless that they're completely asinine and contribute nothing, and it becomes a more dominant feature in the second half. Thankfully, it's never really wasting any important space, but still disappointing for the wasted opportunity. So yeah, don't expect any text that's going to match or explain the development on the same level as you see in the art. You'll only occasionally get hints of that from some of the better captions. Though in terms of information, the real highlight of this book is the spread explaining and demonstrating the Veilguard art style, a very cool inclusion. I am rather concerned and disheartened that the prospect of the popular negative opinion of the Veilguard game is going to cause people to negatively react to this book, or simply just overlook it and not give it a chance, because audiences audiences largely confuse their appreciation or disdain of a tie-in book with the media it's based on, which is a shame here because this one has so much potential appeal and enjoyment regardless of what you think of the game. And, despite this book's minor displays of perplexing incompetence, it is one of the most truly remarkable and substantially enjoyable art books I've ever encountered. Another reason I worry people will overlook it is because of how bland the cover is. The design is non-existent, and the image is just too generic fantasy. Even the pointless deluxe edition and BioWare store exclusive covers are barely any better on that front either.